Good afternoon, Math 318. My name is Scott McCardle. This is Lucas Maddock and Kevin Knowles. And we're here to share with you a good friend of ours, Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes was born 200 BC. He was born in Cyrene and spent a lot of time there. And while he was there, he began to discover his likeness or his liking to geography and math and poetry and a lot of different areas. And unfortunately, as brilliant as he was, he didn't get a lot of credit for a lot of things. In fact, he is commonly known as the second-ranked individual in a lot of different fields. So, as brilliant as he was, it's a shame he didn't get that notoriety. But what we're going to talk about today is some of the things that he was known for, some of the things that he developed or discovered. We're going to touch on quite a few things, and then Kevin will elaborate on that, and then Lucas will kind of fine-tune specifically the geography or the geometry in one of his great discoveries, which was the calculation of the circumference of the Earth. Like I said, he was born in Cyrene, enjoyed geography, developed geography, invented geography. He calculated the circumference of the Earth along with the Moon. He also invented leap year. He was the inventor of prime numbers and the discovery of that, and Kevin's going to elaborate on that a little bit more. And also he was the head librarian in Alexandria, which was pretty high rank for an individual coming from where he was, and that's where he did a lot of his studying. So at this point I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, who's going to elaborate on some of the things I mentioned earlier.
Okay, well, Eratosthenes basically pioneered geography. He was the first person to really go and map out the area around him and write down the landscape and relative distances between them. He also was the first person to give a modern day explanation for why the Nile flooded. There was a lot of theories floating around at the time, but he was the first person to suggest that heavy rainfall near the source of the Nile was what caused flooding near the end of the Nile. Most of the works he wrote are lost to us, and we only have really references that other works made to his work. And two of those are On Means and Platonicus. And both of these were very influential in the fields of geometry and arithmetic and helped us really establish the two fields and very much develop them. He also created the sieve of Eratosthenes, which was a way to find prime numbers. It's a very hand-involved methodology, but it was very useful for mathematicians at the time, and it is still taught commonly in schools today. He also was the first person to come up with a very, very close estimation for the circumference of the Earth, which Lucas will be explaining in more detail. He also was the first person to can't read it. Oh, right. He also was the first person to include leap years on his calendars, which helped make calendars more accurate than they were at the time. He also made works in astronomy and had allegedly cataloged 675 stars. His catalog is now lost to us, however.
Thank you, Kevin. As mentioned previously, Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth, which is pretty epic. Let me get the pencil here. He did this by using a couple of facts he knew at the time. He knew the distance between two towns was about 5,000 stadia, which is approximately 500 miles. This distance was commonly known amongst the public because it was traveled often by commerce, and they had a very accurate estimation of the distance. He also knew that at noon, if he looked down a well, his head would block out the sun and he would have no shadow. So he knew precisely when noon was.
And that happened at a particular time of the year, right?
Right, this happened at a particular time of the year when the sun was directly overhead. It would only happen one day of the year, which he also knew.
Yeah, June 21st.
June 21st.
Yeah.
And he also knew that at the town 5,000 stadia away, a stick coming vertically out of the ground would create an angle of 7.2 degrees with the sun. Now, using these facts, he could calculate the circumference of the Earth. So here is where he's looking down the well in one town, and here is where the sun is creating a shadow with a stick coming out of the other town. There's no angle with the sun here, however, there's an angle of 7.2 degrees with the sun here. Knowing this and geometry about parallel lines, he could calculate the circumference using this equation, where theta and L are the arc length and the angle with the sun. Once he knew these, simple algebra would just yield the circumference c here. So this came out to about 25,000 miles, and at the time that was 25,000 miles, and he was said to be 2% to 10% off from the exact calculation today, because we didn't really know how much one stadia was at the time. It's argued commonly. And that's how he calculated the circumference of the Earth, and that was probably over 2,000 years ago, which is insane.
Yeah. So that was obviously what he's most known for, was that discovery, was that calculation. Unfortunately, in his latter years, he became blind, and because of that, it frustrated him to the point where he actually starved himself to death and then died at the age of 81. So again, an incredible man, didn't get the recognition that I think we all agree he should have, but still came up with some incredible measurements and calculations that to this day are still very, very accurate. So again, there's our Eratosthenes. We want to thank you, Math 318. We'll see you next time.